marriage has 3 rings: the engagement ring, the wedding ring, and the bicker ring. We're here to settle the fights that don't matter and have no winner. It's the 3 Rings Podcast with another new argument.
Welcome to another episode of the 3 Rings Podcast. My name is Phil.
And I'm Lauren.
And we are...
married for right now, but you're annoying me.
Wow. So we're off to a great start on this week's episode.
Well, he's making fun of me for screwing up the intro last week, and he made me try and do it a couple times, and I told him I didn't want to, but he tried to make me do it anyways.
And she didn't, and here we are.
I refused, yeah.
Yep. So we're here. So with that kind of fiery passion that you're bringing to the episode already, it's going to be quite a barn burner this week when we talk about the best decade in music.
Yeah.
Which we're both very passionate about music.
We are.
We have differing tastes,
It's
kind
like
of.
Well, that was not a...
That was not a word.
No, it's kind of a Venn diagram.
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that we're good on. And then other things
for
we just...
Dolly Parton and your love for... Slipknot.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things
two
that
opposite ends of the spectrum, but
yeah, you're.
Do you remember when you were super into Hollywood Undead, and I wanted to throw myself out of the car every time you turned them on?
Today?
Yeah.
And still into Hollywood Undead. Like, don't pretend that it's something that.
Still want to throw myself out the car whenever it comes on.
Have you seen a Hollywood Undead show?
Yes, many. I went to many with you.
Did you?
Yes.
I don't remember dragging you to Hollywood Undead shows, but they're so much fun.
Multiple.
They are so much fun.
I've been to at least 3.
And here's the thing, too. They are actually very nice guys.
Yes, they are nice. Yellow Wolf was nice. I'd still rather, listen to, I don't know.
Yeah, you just had a bad experience at that show.
That show
was really
bad.
rough. But, yeah,
he wasn't bad.
He was fantastic.
Wasn't bad. The crowd was so bad.
The crowd sucked.
I don't want to, I
will admit to that.
Yeah,
the crowd was bad
I respect Yellow Wolf. Hate his music. Respect him. But his fans are some of the worst fans I have ever come across in my entire life.
I mean,
they were right up there with Kid Rock fans.
Ooh. We can see a trend here.
Yeah,
got something you got something against white rappers, honey?
I think my issue is more so with most rock rappers than it is white rappers.
Okay.
I don't would we call Limp Bizkit?
Limp Bizkit is different. That's new metal.
God, I hate new metal. Okay, like that.
All right. Well, you are not going to enjoy this today at all as we talk about the best decade of music.
What's your take? Tell me. I already know what it is, but...
My take for the best decade in music is the 2000s. Like
early aughts or
2000 up to 2010.
Okay.
That is the best decade in music.
So for us from age 10 to 20.
Yeah. So just the 3 things that I'll hit on, mainly because of the different genres and artists that came out of that decade. The nostalgia, which is always a big point, but also the music industry as a whole with things like iTunes, streaming services, and everything leading up to the creation of what we have right now with things like Spotify and Apple Music and all the sorts. So that's why I think the 2000s is the best decade in music. What do you got?
I am going with the 1970s.
Okay.
Which is not something that we lived through, maybe in a past life, but
definitely in a past life.
But I am going with the 1970s because of the diversity of content and genres. The 70s heralded the birth of disco, folk, funk, these. I mean, folk that's arguable, but
yeah.
I am also going to go with the 1970s because it kind of heralded modern rock music.
Okay. Won't argue that.
I am going to choose that one because I think it's been extremely influential on music today, and it's also an extremely popular decade of music. So these are my takes.
Okay. All right. Well, I am eager to hear your takes for the 1970s, because I will say that every single decade has something positive to it.
Yeah.
With music, and everything is built upon from there. So we're not necessarily shitting on other decades. It's more about just what we think is the best one. So
yeah, there are bands from the 80s and 90s that we love. Like,
yeah. So I am eager to hear.
So do you want me to start? Is that where?
I'd love for you to start.
Okay.
Yours came first, so you can go first.
Age before beauty.
Yes.
I'm choosing the 1970s, and obviously, like, I am heavily influenced by, like, my the style of music that I like today, and like some of my favorite artists and records. Like, I would say that with I'm so bad at remembering names, but like Andrew Bird's "Break It Yourself," the Avett Brothers' "I and Lovin' You," and Fleetwood Mac's "Rumors" are probably my 3 all-time favorite records. Just like they are like my, if I were on a desert island and I could only bring 3, those would be the 3 that I would choose.
Yeah, they are very stylistically similar.
And heavily influenced by the 1970s. Well, I mean, and the Rumors came out in the 1970s.
Yeah, it's from the 70s, so that one makes sense.
So this is obviously heavily influenced by just my personal taste.
Yeah, but mine will be as well.
Yeah,
but,
the 1970s were all of the top music from the 1970s is incredibly diverse. They're like dance oriented, like sounds like disco, but it's also to like the rock, like I said, the birth of rock, but they also are extremely diverse in their content. Like if you have an interest, then there is something from the 1970s that's for you. So they touched on bringing about a better world. There's a lot of like protest anthems that came out in the 70s. Breaking free, about drugs. There's like, you've got like the lighter, poppier, dancey stuff. There's songs about superstition and like kind of the occult, and like it's just if there's a topic that you want to touch on, the 1970s has something for you.
Okay.
So that's my first point. My second point is, so in 1971 the Beatles broke up. That was the year that they dissolved.
And you're picking this for the best decade of music, the greatest band arguably of all time.
And I know that there are like a lot of people our age that like to shit on the Beatles, but like whether you like the Beatles music or you don't, you have to agree that modern pop music exists because of the Beatles. Yeah.
Again, they arguably the biggest band to ever exist
in all time.
The most
influential band of like
100%. I cannot stand listening to the Beatles. Hate listening to the Beatles. But
modern pop songs are written because of the 100%. Way that John Lennon and Paul McCartney wrote pop songs.
They were geniuses. They created.
Did they steal some stuff? Yeah,
probably.
But
every artist does. But they were incredibly influential, and music today would be completely different had they not existed. So
I would argue what the Beatles did for pop music, bands in the 1970s did for rock music. Okay. Like you hear, especially in the like straight rock music that you and I like the things that we would say are like true, genuine rock music today. Mm-hmm. So White Reaper, I would say.
They do pull a very 70s kind of sound.
Royal Blood.
Yeah.
The Foo Fighters. All heavily influenced by the 1970s.
Yeah, I would say a lot of bands from the 60s and 70s in rock music are really the focal point for today's.
Also, in the 1970s, like the offshoots of rock music, like all of the different types of like rock music that we have came out of the 70s. So you got like hard and soft progressive rock, you got punk, folk influenced rock, glam rock, southern rock, metal came out of the 1970s, like reggae influenced rock, krautrock, like all of these different types of rock music came out of the 1970s. So like we owe the diversity of rock music, and some would say your entire job, to the bands of the 1970s.
Yeah.
So it's an extremely, extremely popular era of music. You could look at it still had an influence on pop music as well.
Mm-hmm.
You look at like popular songs of the past like 10 years, like Get Lucky, Uptown Funk, all very heavy 70s influence.
Yeah, very disco.
Rolling Stone's most recent list of the 500 greatest albums of all time had 35 releases from the 60s, 41 from the 70s in their top 100. So those were the two heaviest in the top 100.
Okay. And while I will not disagree with that, the one thing that I will point out that I do disagree with is from surveys conducted in 2003 and in 2009.
Okay.
So,
but 2009's right at the end of the...
yeah, but I mean, we're also in 2020 at this point.
Okay.
So that was 10,
That's fair.
10
I was also going to bring
15.
up the point, like, I do have to acknowledge that, you know, the majority of the people in the world, or the majority of the people in our country right now are baby boomers. Mm-hmm. Which this is right in their wheelhouse. So
Yeah.
this is going to have some influence. But like that, and like you brought up, I know you touched on nostalgia, but this is like the 1970s is nostalgic for me because it's like the type of music that my dad in particular like really loved, and it's what I remember my mom and dad playing for me, especially Fleetwood Mac, who you know I absolutely love, but Carly Simon, Carole King was like a little bit more in the 60s, but she had stuff in the 70s too, and like, you know, Elton John was a huge one in our house, but also like country music, like Dolly Parton stuff from the 1970s, like that was really big like in our house. So I mean, it is nostalgic for me too, so I will acknowledge that.
Yeah, and I mean, outside of being nostalgic for you, it's nostalgic for like your parents.
Yes, absolutely.
And anybody that grew up in the 70s. Like,
my parents were born in 64 and 67, so this is like the music from their childhood.
Yeah, that's going to be right in their wheelhouse for that. So that makes sense. I mean, it brings up a lot of points. I got nothing against any of that, to be fair, other than the fact that I don't think that it's better than the 2000s. I think that the 2000s had way more impact, not just on, you know,
but like we can't
music
even
in
measure
general.
the long-term impact of
Some of it you can.
long-term.
Long-term, we're talking...
The fact that the 70s
some of
are
these
still influencing music today.
I mean, some of the songs that came out in 2000, remember, are now 20 years old. Like, some of these things have a
But an
huge
era of
impact.
music from 50 years ago.
Okay, pick something from, you know, the 1930s that people would still listen to. Like, you can't just base it on the year. Like, some of the songs from the 2000s could potentially be...
I'm just saying this
30 years later.
This
Fine.
theory isn't
It's not
time
something...
tested
No.
in the same way.
Some of it, yes. 20 years is a good chunk of time for some of these songs. If they're still around and people are still talking about them, 20 years
I also
later...
will say that I feel like...
still pretty good.
And I don't mean this to be offensive, but I also don't not mean this to be offensive.
Okay.
But the early 2000s were like the heyday for like dude bro music. You know what I mean? Which like...
Welcome to my part of the conversation, baby. Let's fucking get into it.
Okay.
You want to talk about the different genres and artists that came out of the 2000s? Just for my personal taste, emo and pop punk was a huge thing that surged in the 2000s. So bands like Blink-182 and Fall Out Boy, it was kind of the resurgence of Green Day. Not that they really needed a resurgence, but American Idiot was huge. My Chemical Romance, Paramore, Panic at the Disco, Jimmy World, all in that emo rock and pop punk kind of realm. But arguably one of the biggest genres to come out of the 2000s and changed rock music completely was nu metal. As much as you want to hate on it, nu metal...
Fuckboy anthem everywhere.
Jesus.
Like, Jesus.
Nu metal completely changed what alternative as far as a format was, and it nearly destroyed the format.
it nearly destroyed like people's earbuds everywhere because
stop. Just because you don't
eardrums, I mean, because
if you don't like it, that's fine.
It's
but
horrendous.
Bands like Korn, Limp Bizkit,
Yuck.
Papa Roach, System of a Down, all the things that you absolutely love.
I would rather light myself on fire.
But these are all bands. Most of them are still doing stuff. Limp Bizkit, not really. System of a Down, they fucking hate each other, but that's a different story. But
I
also,
didn't know that.
Oh yeah,
Do they hate each other as much as I hate them?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably
wow. Okay,
more.
I kind of respect that.
Probably a lot more.
Probably more.
But also the 2000s, it was the years of early American Idol, when American Idol was actually good and you actually knew the people that were on it. But you had Kelly Clarkson. I mean, she had a pretty good career. Still has, I guess, if you want to.
She's got a talk show. I'd say Kelly Clarkson's still doing okay.
Yeah, she's doing fine.
Carrie Underwood, too.
Yep. So, I mean, you had names that actually went on to do something. Like, tell me who won American Idol in the past 10 years.
I'm literally
Exactly, because nobody fucking cares about American Idol anymore. But early American Idol was a big thing. Hip-hop completely changed. It was completely revolutionized by the Southern crunk sound with Lil Jon. Lil Jon was on everything. Get Low was one of the biggest songs of all time for that entire decade. So, you know, not bad there. But also, some of the most iconic hip-hop albums also came out then with records and singles from Jay-Z, from 50 Cent, from Kanye West. The Neptunes and Timberlake basically produced everything in the 2000s. And also kind of crossed into that pop world. You had T-Pain bringing auto-tune to the world and completely revolutionizing how songs are recorded and produced. Even though he was a little bit different with how he did things.
I think what I'm learning here is that I just viewed the 2000s as an extremely low point for rock music.
Well,
like I like pop and hip hop and like all of that stuff, but like new metal was
me. New metal was huge, but
emo was great. But like
think about alternative music too. Alternative had some iconic bands that came out in the early 2000s. You had the Killers, you had Death Cab for Cutie, you had the White Stripes.
I just think the new metal is such a black mark on my mind that that's like all I associate with it.
But that's why I'm arguing all the rest of it. Okay. Yes, it was huge, but I mean technically
it was
you could
diverse. Yes, I will give you that.
Linkin Park was technically new metal when they came out. So, I mean, it was a wide range of things. I love
early Linkin Park. Like, I'm not even going to say that was great.
You can like a genre. That's fine.
No disrespect to, like, Chester.
I don't like country music. I don't like Dolly Parton. Like, but it's part of the argument. So, there's that. But, you know, alternative...
you have a really hard time selling me on the merits of new metal.
Oh, stop it.
What's influenced by new metal now? What is that?
A lot of bands. A lot of bands now would cite bands like Linkin Park or Korn.
Yes, but like I don't think I've really heard anyone go like, you know what really changed my life and like influenced the entire outcome of my career? Limp Bizkit. Like, give me a break.
I mean, again, you want to talk about
maybe my issue is more so with just Limp Bizkit.
It 100% is, because you look at some metal bands and like they will definitely cite bands like System of a Down. Like Avatar, like would cite System of a Down.
Okay.
Like, but this is a genre that you just 100% will not get on board with. You would agree that I am right, though. Like they would be in the same.
Yes, I would agree that you're right.
You cannot like them. That's different.
I'm not agreeing that they're good.
But whatever. We'll get away from new metal. We'll go back to pop.
All right.
Solo career for Justin Timberlake ended up being pretty good. Artists like Lady Gaga, Beyonce started her solo stuff.
Okay.
The world gave us Coldplay, gave us the Jonas Brothers, gave us Drake, gave us early Taylor Swift. You know, some of the most successful crossover from hip hop into pop came from Eminem, who was also named Artist of the Decade by Billboard Music. And the year 2000 also gave us Hybrid Theory from Linkin Park, which is arguably one of the greatest albums of all time. So that just gets into the artists and the genre.
I don't know if it's like I am like one of those people that's more so like things were better before or whatever, with the exception of like women's rights and people of color, but like music, I just don't think that we like really killed the game in that like era.
I think we did. Those are some pretty big fucking names.
I mean, yeah, there's some big names, but like, who do you
just mentioned Taylor Swift.
Okay, but like 50 years from now, like let's put the same amount of distance between 2000s and
so in 2050.
In 2050, so 30 years from now, who do you think our kids are going to be like? You know,
you don't think that our kids are going to discover Linkin Park or Taylor Swift or anything in the hip hop world like Drake?
Yeah, I mean,
they're not going to go back to, you know, the early sounds of Jay-Z and 50 Cent
but like,
and
our
Nas.
Kids, are we still going to be talking about Nickelback 30 years from now? Are we still really going to be talking about, like, System of a Down 30 years from now or Slipknot 30 years from now? Like,
I mean,
if our
maybe.
kids are listening to Slipknot 30 years from now, they're like the weird kids that nobody wants to sit with at lunch. Like, let's be real.
I mean, think about it this way, though. Like, we're now 30 years removed from the 90s, and people are still listening to Nirvana, still listening to everything grunge related.
Yeah, but like, name a metal band from the 90s that really like stood the
Pantera.
test of. Oh Jesus, this is. I
what are you
hate
trying to
doing
do?
the music episodes with you. I hate doing them.
But I'm just saying, like, we don't know yet, but there's a good chance that people will go.
I have a hard time. I have a hard time that I think
There's
that
a
our
bigger
kids are
list
going
of
to come in and
bands.
be like, you know, those guys that wore those like effed up masks on stage. There was the dude that
They
like
could.
pounded the barrel or whatever the
Keg.
hell it is, keg. I don't see that, and
It's
if that
possible.
happens, I'm worried about them. So like.
But you could have said that, you know, you could have said that in 2000 when people were looking back at music from the 70s. There are way more failed bands that don't stand the test of time than there are successful ones. Artists like Taylor Swift, artists like Eminem,
know if we're gonna
Beyonce.
have as many to offer from that era. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know. Like, it's hard, and it is hard for us to say. Like, I bet that because I think there are like sleeper hits from every like era too that
It'll
maybe
happen.
weren't super popular at the time, but then people rediscovered like years down the road. But like,
But I think that option is going to be a little easier to do because of what my second point is. I haven't even got to my second point yet, but my second point is everything to do with just how the industry had to redefine itself, because after everything happened with file sharing and Napster, the control started to go back towards the labels and the artists, things like iTunes. It was everything that led up to streaming services like Spotify.
I do
everything
agree
in that
that's
realm.
really great. Like, I do agree that the power should have gone back to the artists like way before all of that happened. But like,
Yeah, but music was able to travel so much easier. That's why we had so much more of it and so many like one-hit wonders or anything like that.
I will argue too that like music now, I mean, still takes a certain level of skill, but not the same amount of skill that producing music during the 1970s took. When you had to do everything by hand, it's not
different.
as good. Like, people aren't like, they don't have to put as much work into it as they did back in the day.
No.
They also didn't have to, you also don't really, I mean, I guess there's a case against this too, but like, how much harder was it to like get yourself heard in the 1970s?
Yeah. I'm not going to argue that. I mean, it was more difficult, which is why
So, like,
the
the
bands
cream
that
of the-
got heard, exactly what you were going to say,
the cream of the crop. Like, you
cream
really had
rises
to
to the
try.
top. Like, and that's how it was, and that's why those bands have been able to stand the test of time, because like a lot of the other bands just didn't make it. And there are plenty of bands that don't make it. There are far more that don't make it than do.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at today's time, and even when you go back into the 2000s, there are a lot more artists that were able to create and share their music and have it heard more than, you know, in different countries all around the world, more than just, you know, in their small little community, because of how the industry changed with things like iTunes and with the invention of, you know, the iPod and being able to take digital music and be able to listen to it that way.
I think that's fantastic. I'm having a hard time talking today. I think that it's fantastic for like diversity of sound. I don't know if that's fantastic for quality. Do you know what I mean?
It's not. But you're exposed to a lot more. And again, the cream will rise to the top. It's the same way that things work with radio. Like, we have it's broken down into new music, like semi-new music that, were hits that people still want to hear, and then your entire gold library of songs that have stood the test of time, that rank anywhere, just speaking for alternative right now, can rank for some stations from the 80s all the way through, about 2015, 2016. Mm-hmm. So you have bands like Imagine Dragons right now, and it's like they've been around for 10 years?
Yeah.
So, but they're one of the biggest bands in alternative. Same with like 21 Pilots, who haven't been around even as long as that. But we don't know if those songs are going to be the ones that stand the test of time 30 years from now, just like people didn't know if Nirvana was going to stick around for 30 years. But it was, at its time, the biggest of the big, So,
yeah.
So it's hard to be able to, say like this is going to stand the test of time more than this, because it depends on how the industry goes. It depends on how we consume music, and it also depends on the shape of the world moving forward. Like right now, there's a huge resurgence of people that are listening to things like Rage Against the Machine and Public Enemy.
Yeah, which I think that's great, but like we didn't have, like, what came out of the early 2000s that has that same message?
The message was different. The
message was dumber.
The message wasn't dumber. It was just different. It's watching music evolve throughout the years. When you look at, especially like with hip hop, the 2000s went from the gangster rap era and the East versus West era from the 80s into the 90s, and then the 2000s became the era of Jay-Z with Dirt Off Your Shoulder, and you had Puff Daddy with his like everything's flashy, look how much money I have, and then it transitioned back into 50 Cent.
Great for evolution. I just don't, like, again, I'm not arguing that there are merits, and I'm not arguing that there was like this incredible change that happened in the industry, that happened in music, that happened in genres. Like, I just don't know. I think the early 2000s were great for change. I don't know if they were great for quality. Get to your last point. Let's just move on.
No, fuck it. The nostalgia part is it's the same conversation that we're having right now. Is you're just not going to get on board with any of that. So it don't fucking matter.
Phil's mad.
I am
Phil's
mad.
Like legitimately mad, not just play mad. Phil's mad.
I am mad. Like you can't tell me that something that was written in the 2000s, or even something written right now, just because it doesn't have...
Right now, I think that there's a lot to be written about that's very similar to what was written about in the 1970s. Like, we've been going through some very similar stuff, and I'm sure that there will be some music that comes out of right now that's very, like... that's in the same vein. Like, we're going to have the resurgence of protest songs and stuff like that.
But that's not the point that I'm trying to make, because you can take something from right now. If you want to take, like, Taylor Swift, okay? Think of all the hits that she has, and think about the songs that are probably going to stand the test of time.
Okay, The Man, which came out this year, very different than You Belong With Me, which came out in the early 2000s.
Which one's going to be heard 30 years from now?
I would say The Man. I would not say You Belong With Me.
I would 100% disagree with that. Or what was You Need to Calm Down? No, completely gone from pop radio. Nobody plays it anymore. Again, a very politically driven song, has a message, was well done, but it's not going to stand the test of time versus something else.
I am standing by my point that the early 2000s were great for evolution. I'm not going to argue that. I think that they were fantastic in that it brought a lot of significant needed change in the industry and in music as a whole. I think that quality, though, that's a different conversation. I'll say this. If you're a time traveler and you want to weigh in... Please tell us.
And even if you're not a time traveler, please weigh in.
You can find us at 3 Rings Pod. That's THREE Rings Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And please rate, review us, download us, share us with your friends. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. We'd love it if you left us a 5-star review and shared with your friends. You can also find us on Spotify, pretty much anywhere podcasts are.